you shouldn't, when there's an amazing, impressive tool, you shouldn't lean away from it. You should lean into it. If you are scared of being replaced by something like that, all I would say to someone like that is just figure out how you can use it to your benefit and keep doing what you're already doing and just use it to make you better.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Andrew Price Podcast, the podcast for serious artists. We are talking with Aaron Limonick, who is a concept artist who worked for 11 years at one of my favorite studios in the whole world, Naughty Dog, working on titles like Last of Us, Uncharted, Last of Us Part 2, and more. So in this wide-ranging conversation, we talk about the importance of curating your portfolio, the fast and slow approach to finding a job, and then everyone's favorite topic, AI, and why, most interestingly, Aaron is not threatened one bit by AI. Interesting. So, without further ado, here is Aaron. All right, Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so great to finally meet you and chat. I've been a fan for quite a long time. I had a box of pink donuts, but I just ate them all. I don't know what happened, man.
Very nice. Funny you should mention that. I'm working on this dreams. NFT. Oh, dude, it's everywhere, and you wouldn't believe it, but like people just take photographs of donuts that they see, like just like out on the street, like in a donut shop window or something, and then they just like tweet them at me like all day, and they're like, "Dude, Andrew, I found one." I'm like, "Yeah, it's like the most common type of donut. It's a pink donut." Yeah. But anyways, and yeah, I'm making this like NFT thing. It's like a baker's dozen of like different donuts, and I've just been looking at donuts nonstop for like a year, and I'm over it. But anyways, let's talk about you, Aaron. Have you always been artistic?
So yeah, my background was I started drawing and the same as a lot of artists, like, since I can remember holding a pencil, learning the alphabet, doing creative stuff with a pen, pencil, anything I could get my hands on. And I kind of always felt like, or at least with my parents and myself talking about, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? There was never really another thought about what I wanted to do. I kind of always wanted to be an artist. I was fortunate in the sense of my mom's a designer. She owns a couple different, she has had a couple different careers in the design field, and my dad's worked in film since the 70s, I think. So it's so
no way. What does he do in film?
He's a musician. He's a studio musician, percussionist in the film industry.
Right.
So
did you grow up in LA?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
One of the few people like born there, not moved there.
It
right?
usually drives people away, and then people who end up here started somewhere else. But yeah, I grew up with a background that kind of made me, I think the biggest thing that prevents people from being artists in our society is just the fact that it's not really seen as a valid career by a lot of people, or they just don't know. So they're just taught that it's kind of like, oh, that's what you do when you're a kid, and then you grow up and you stop drawing with crayons on paper, and that's not, But me, growing up in this environment, when I was very young, my parents would, I'd get to go sit in a scoring session with my dad, and I would meet some people. Like, I'd see that people work in this industry. Like, it's pretty common sense. Like, people, you have to make a movie somehow, right? You have to make a game somehow. Well, you get that. So people have to make it. But somehow there's a disconnect where in society people think that that's not, like, there isn't this giant industry with thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing all these cool jobs, right? When you're a kid, you don't, a lot of people kind of just naturally think, oh, I'm not going to do that. But to me, I was like, no, that's what I'm born to do. I'm built for that. Like, it's everything I've ever focused my life on is kind of that. So,
wow. So from the start, you knew that was your mission.
Well, just to be super clear, I wasn't confident that I would be able to get a job in the industry. That's a different conversation altogether. Because, right. in our, the usual thing when I do a talk or I do a workshop or a class or whatever I'm doing, the thing that I think defines us being like the oldest millennials, like the very fringe of almost Gen X, but the oldest millennials, is that our generation was the guinea pig for what became like concept design. Like when you look at like schools and all this content, and even people like yourself that are making amazing content that everybody loves so much, there was absolutely nothing like that when I went into college, when I went into art school. And by the time I came out of art school, the game had changed. Everything was different. Everyone was doing digital. 3D was not there yet, so concept artists and illustrators weren't really using it yet. The only people that were using it are matte painters, because that was like literally part of their pipeline. So even just to look at that, in that 5-year stretch of like when so what did I start in 2000? Yeah, 2000. In that stretch of time, from 2000 to 2005, it went from being like, oh, I want to work at Pixar, I want to do like charcoal drawings, and I want to do, or whatever that was at that time. It was probably a little before that. And then it went to like, no, that's way too slow. Everything's digital. It's Photoshop, photo bashing, paint over photos, using all these various different amazing techniques. But there was no playbook on how to do that. It was very, very hard to find. And there were some teachers at Art Center, which is where I went, that were teaching that, but not the techniques that we use today. None of that. It was all these like very early experimental kind of things that were fine for that time, but that's not the way we were going to end up working. So what's interesting is everything that I do as a professional, I learned as a professional, which is not, that wouldn't work today. You would have to, show those skills to get a job. But back then it wasn't necessary. I was doing marker drawings, and I was doing some basic Photoshop painting, but nothing complex, nothing to achieve really kind of the fidelity that is expected of us today.
And for clarity, you were doing like concept art. That was your focus in Art Center?
So my major was, like sorry, I may have skipped over that, but my major was illustration. So what we kind of all ended up doing is either you were in illustration and then you learned some industrial design, transportation design, product design, all that, or you started out in one of those majors and then you had to learn illustration skills. So what ended up being the concept art skill set was a hybrid of those two worlds, essentially. So I was an illustration major with a focus on entertainment, which meant there were a few cherry-picked classes that were starting to go into that territory of like, let's work together as a team, let's develop a product, let's pick a team leader, let's pitch ideas to the class, like things that we all have to do on a regular basis. But as a student being in illustration, that's like very alien to us at that time.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. When you were talking about, learning the skills on the job and figuring it out, it's like, I've sort of realized that like the art fields is like weirdly related to like engineering, because like engineering is like changing constantly. And a similar thing, I imagine if you studied, like how to become an engineer 5 years ago, it's not as relevant today. And another 5 years, it's like completely changed. And a similar thing can be said of art. It doesn't change as fast, but still it's a lot faster than other industries. And some people don't know what they're getting into. It's not suitable for everyone. For the people who are just like geeked out and they just want to try everything and like experiment, it's like it's just fun and it's more fast paced. But some people prefer I want to learn it at school, and then I just want to do it and get paid. And it's like you find yourself being replaced very quickly.
It would be nice. It would be nice if that was the way it was. That's how it should be. And that's just a segue into that. I started to teach about 10, maybe 12 years ago or something like that. And what I really loved about that is that I got to not only just the idea of helping people that are lost, in their vision, or that students are effectively like trying to find their vision and trying to find their place. And in the art world, it's really vast. It's like very elusive of like, where do you fit in? Like, oh, what should I focus on this? These teachers are telling me I should learn a little bit of everything, and this guy's saying I should focus on, it's very difficult to define yourself, especially when you're relatively young and haven't really like repeated these steps 100,000 times where you're like, this is what feels right to me, and these other things probably don't. Maybe hard to tell at that time. So I like to. I thought what it was is that I could create the course that I wish I always had. I could give them the information that I never got and tell them like what steps are really important, and like this is how you high level stuff, like stuff that to me is more as a student, what sculpted me so much is just that feeling of working with other people, feeding off, having to define like what type of person that you are and where you might fit, and being put in that environment that is Art Center is incredibly stressful on a young person that hasn't gone through that before. There's absolutely nothing that could prepare you for that if you go in and you're, if you're not like 25 years old and you've already been to college and went to like UCLA or went to Notre Dame or actual like a real university and you've done the grind for 4 years, then sort of different. But when you're 18, 19 years old, it's like being put in the meat grinder. Like there's nothing that could prepare you for the pace that you're going to have to be at, and the competition that will be there. So to me, I get to look back on those times of like how lost I felt and how hard that was for me, and I get to like try and help people in teaching anyways, help people that are going through that. I know it very well. And to kind of give them the information that I feel is boiled down to the essence of what is required of us, regardless of technology. Because again, the elder millennial thing that I was talking about is something unique to our generation. Is we had to change a lot. We had to learn how to adapt and change a lot, because it's like from 1980 to 1990, sure, the internet, like a lot of stuff changed, but it wasn't like literally in 2 years, these programs like what we are using will probably be more or less, feel it just Blender. Look at Blender now versus 10 years ago. I mean, it's a joke. Yeah. It's not even the same language. It's like learning a different language.
Yeah.
So I think us being forced to do that, to me, gives me the confidence of just knowing that, hey, look, if you keep your mindset on those core values of what you want to do and where you see yourself, and what you see yourself really, where you see yourself fitting in and what your sort of voice is, then the tools that you use to make your imagery or use to make whatever it is that you do as an artist, to me is not really as important, because you could learn those things. Like, obviously now, especially now, people like yourself making this stuff that is like, it couldn't make it much easier to learn these incredible tools. I'm not saying it's easy to use, but I mean, to learn it to what we do as a concept artist, which is you never have to be a master at any technical software of any kind, but you have to know how to use a lot of it, a little bit, at least a little bit, So to me, I like to be able to, it's very intimidating now, especially someone starting out who doesn't know anything about any of those, and they're like, wait, I got to learn Marvelous, I got to learn Blender, I got to render in Octane, but what's Octane? Why not Redshift? Why do I learn ZBrush or 3D Coat? Like, it's so much, it's really overwhelming. We just had to learn how to paint and draw really well, which is hard as hard as I was going to say hard as fuck. I suppose I can say that because you have an editor. Either way,
you could say that. It's all right.
It's hard as fuck. It was hard, really, really hard, because you hate your work for many years. There's nothing. If you teach someone who's learning 3D, like, here's displacement maps. Here's what they can do. The day that they figure it out, the morning they didn't. Now it's in the evening and they've figured it out. It's a completely different world that now you can use, that can change the way your work looks pretty drastically, especially. Yeah. If you're using it in a really creative, interesting way. People like Paul Chaddison doing crazy, like, overlapping normals that like extrude so much detail on the surface of technical, space stations and stuff. That's like night and day. And not having that skill versus having that skill is very different. But painting is like, you hate what you do for so long. Yeah. Different grind.
Yeah, I realized that myself, because I did this thing where I was trying to learn how to paint, and I did it for 6 months and then another like 2 years, just like in my evenings. And it is, people don't say that enough, but like doing anything by hand that just relies on no software behind it almost is very punishing. And I was not really prepared for it. Like, it was just, there's really like as you said, 3D is very like it is technical, but it means you can rely on the software a lot to kind of like fix things. Like you can like figure out how displacement maps work and the color spacing and this kind of thing, and you can kind of get an edge over someone who doesn't understand it as technically proficient as you. And you can download a displacement map, as you say, and you can like use it, and you can figure that out, and then you can render something that nobody else could, and it's kind of like unique. But like when you've just got your own drawing skills, like it's also so much harder because you know it's only you. It's your fault. Like the reason it sucks is 100% you. You can't blame it on like oh, it's because I don't have a good graphics card, you know. And it was actually like the hardest thing about it was like mentally, like how do you continue to learn when everything you're giving it everything, and you're trying to think through what am I doing wrong, and you're doing and you're trying these things that are like so hard, and you've done 10 experiments of like maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, and it's just getting worse. That's when it's like you can see why like without a school a lot of people just don't continue, because doing it yourself is without guidance is very, very difficult, at least in my experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the same can be said with a 3D software, to be honest. Like, I mean, you troubleshooting something with like Blender with some of the quirks that are in there can be maddening. I mean, for various, or really any of them, like any program, some are more complex than others. I would imagine Maya is like a no-go, like trying to learn that without any kind of like, why does this thing keep going wrong? Someone that can just tell you, hey, look, that right there, this is why. Just do this and then it'll fix it. Sometimes when that happens and people show me something, I look back, I'm like, how would I have ever figured that out? Like, I would have never figured that out without somebody sharing that information with me.
That's so true. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, if you look at my history, it's everything I've ever taught in video came from Googling it and learning it from somebody else's answer on like Blender Stack Exchange or something. And those people also are making use of everybody else's information. So it's not like there's this one person out there who's the smartest and he knows all the answers. Like, no one does. Everyone starts with a Google search.
Yep. I just think some people that I know are very, they're very resourceful and very industrious with like how they're able to figure something out. It still blows me away. A couple of my friends are just like, they're always researching how to, just for the hell of it. It's not like they need to they could have done it the way they were doing it last week. It's more just like they were like really hungry for learning a new cool way to do it, just to see how it feels. To me, I like to stick with what, I like to learn new things if it really jumps out at me, like, oh my God, that will open up doors for me that will really change the way I can work. But if it's just for the hell of learning a new thing, like a new tool, and it doesn't really seem like it will change the way I work that much, I tend to not do that as much as some people, just for sheer amount of time, like just for the time. Like for some people that might be fun to just kind of sort through those things. But it does always amaze me, certain individuals that seem to have a knack for unraveling these really kind of seemingly complex. It's one of those things, like it's easy once you know how kind of things. Like once you know what the possible things that can go wrong are and the troubleshooting of how to fix it, and it's really, you can be creative and the program's not holding you back and you can just have fun. But until you pass that growth, that point, it can be a struggle, a big struggle. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, like learning any new skill is, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I don't know where I was going with that.
No, it's all good. I think but when it comes to learning a new skill, I think it does build your character to be uncomfortable. I think there's something to be said for like that staying in your, and this is again goes back to school. I was something I did to myself like very young, and I felt it was a good exercise, and I still do it to this day. But to put yourself in a situation that is slightly uncomfortable, like it's not exactly what you always do. It's not the exact thing that you always whether it's like how you design things, what the vision is, like something about it is not your usual thing. I think it builds a lot of skill in. So like if you spend time on something that is not what you would normally be doing, and it's a kind of an uncomfortable thing, and then eventually you keep doing it and you start to feel fairly proficient at it, there's this weird thing that happens in your brain where like you go back to the stuff that you're now familiar with, and somehow you have a greater understanding of those things because you opened up some other door, thinking about something in a different way that you wouldn't have. And I feel like there is a benefit to the other stuff, not just to the local benefit of like learning that one isolated skill, but somehow it opens up your thinking for other things that you already were familiar with. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like that.
Yes, no, it definitely does. Well, actually, I was going to ask, because you mentioned at the start, some instructors say, "Oh, you got to learn a little bit of everything." What would your advice be? Do you think there is a benefit in learning? If you want to be a 3D artist, learning a little bit of illustration, a little bit of design, color grading, editing.
Yeah. So here's my thing on that is like what happens in your practice time, and this is the distinction I would make. I'd say that yes, everything is great to try out, and in the only, like I was saying, the biggest thing that students, the struggle that they have is figuring out where to focus their time. Because if you had some kind of a magic crystal ball and you could know in 5 years where you were going to end up as a professional, it'd be very easy, because then you just do those things that led you to that and it'd be fine. The problem is that you don't know what's going to lead you to that and what might happen. You might think you're going to be an environment artist, and then you might take a figure drawing class and just explode and accelerate at a rate that no one can believe how much better you're getting and how fast you are. And then you realize, like, this is my real true passion and I didn't even know that. So how would you know unless you try all these different things? Do you like sorting through, nodes? If you can't stand node structures, then I would probably try and do minimal 3D rendering, because building crazy node structures gives you the most incredible shaders and everything really these days.
Yeah.
So having an understanding of what happens in the practice room, like when you're doing your own thing, that's for you. What you show in your portfolio and what you show public facing is another thing altogether. So some people think that they should show a little bit of everything in their portfolio. I would say what you should show is your best stuff, and you're only as good as the worst thing that you show, because it's possible, and this is the same for professionals, by the way. If you show 10 sketches, these are my ideas, they might pick that worst one, and then you have to do that now. And you didn't even really like it, but you showed it, and that was the one they picked, and now that's the one that you're going to do. So to me, it's like the same parallel to that would be like for a student showing their portfolio is what they remember might be that one that you're kind of like lukewarm about. I just did it really quick, it's not my best work. Well, it should be, because they might remember that, and they might think that that might stick in their memory, and they might not think you're very good because you didn't show the right stuff, and you didn't present yourself in the best light that is the best version of you, because that's what making a portfolio is. So that's the thing I tell students to do, is that you don't need that long to make a portfolio from scratch, because you don't need 50 images. You don't. You just need a handful, 5, 10, 12, 15 in most, if you really want to get down to it, that are your absolute best thing that you can, your best foot forward, the best thing that you can do. And every time you do a new image, kick out the worst one and then replace that with your new best one, and then you will slowly build up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And also, if you're an environment artist and you're doing and that's what you specialize in, and you just want to show that you can do characters too, I would say that's great if they don't pull down your stock overall. Because if they see these great environments and they see these terrible, like these characters that show that your taste doesn't transfer over, it can put a doubt in someone's mind, like, why would they put that up? That could be their last thought, the last thing that they looked at. I remember that character. It was really like the face was weird and the pose was stiff, and it was like, so to me, I like to be blunt with students and just tell them, like, look, if that's not what you're the most passionate about, just wait. If you have never gotten a job, get yourself a job, and you do that by showing your absolute best work. Then once you have a job, now branch out. Now do sketches of your favorite Marvel characters and post that on Instagram and just start getting used to, if that's what you want to do, like do that once you already have a job, not to get a job, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's I like that quote you said, you're only as good as your worst piece. Which is super true, because like the thing that we think of, because we hire artists at Poliigon, and looking at portfolios, it's true when you see like a great portfolio and then they've got a piece of weak work, you start having all these questions in your head, like, do they not realize that piece is poor? Because that's a huge red flag. And then maybe if they don't realize that's poor, maybe that throws into question all the other strong stuff. Like, was the other strong stuff from a tutorial? Were they sort of like leveraging other people's work or skills, or was that sort of like unusual for them to do good at the fore, whereas this one is maybe what their true skill set is like? And it's so true. Like, if you just removed it, like you would, like we've hired someone who just had 2 images in their portfolio. That was it, 2, because they were strong. You know, if they had a third image that was weak, we probably wouldn't have hired them.
See, I'm saying, like, yeah. and the fact that you this thing you just described, where you saw the one that was weak, and then you went through this whole questioning thing in your mind. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you even remember that, like you still remember that. So to me, it makes it's again, or if like someone is absolutely phenomenal at rendering and lighting, and they're using 3D and everything is like they're the most cutting edge techniques, and then they put up some like paintings, digital paintings that are like plein air paintings, and they're like 10 years behind the level of skill where they're at in their. I'm just like, why would you, like, it just doesn't, it's scary because it makes you wonder, like, do they not have a good color sense? Is it just because they're using really sick HDRIs and that's why these are like, do they not know that that's not how you balance a palette? Like, and I don't want to sound like judgmental, but like, if you're looking for somebody that you're going to hire them and you want them to, like, you know, really like pull some heavy weight on a project, then stuff like that could be the last thing that sticks in your mind. And if you're comparing that with someone who is exactly like them, who didn't put that bad set of paintings in there, then you'd be like, well, you wouldn't have a doubt.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's weird, but that's,
it is weird. And it also, and I know it, and yet still when I'm going through my portfolio, I'm like, yeah, but I like that one. You know, I want to keep it. Even though I'm like, it's not my best work, but it's like.
And that's the other thing I wanted to say, is that I can relate so much to that, like holding on so tight, because you're like, I loved it at the time, I thought it was epic, and then you look at it like, and it's like, but I know it's not as good as my other stuff, but I don't want to let it go because I thought it was still, it has some redeeming quality about it. But, you know, I'm the worst. Right. I'm the worst at that. So I'm trying to, you know, I really do try to practice what I preach, and I've purged my portfolio many times, but I do understand the desire to like hold on to those, because they do have some cool things in it. But I would get hired and then I would show those late after that to those people or something. Like, if you really wanted to, I don't know. It's a hard conversation. It's a tough one, because you don't want to stop people from being creative. If they're like, if you love it, then, I mean, I don't want to tell you to like get that out of your. It's just like, if you want my advice, I would say put your best foot forward at all times and not show those things that are maybe weaknesses. We all have them, you know.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's like, you know, if you really wanted to, I think you could probably, like, with the right guidance, get somebody from like being poor to like, or like just like complete beginner to being employable within about 2 years. I think you could. It's just, you would have to be very streamlined, very rigid curriculum, and yeah, you might not actually enjoy it at the end of it. It's like, maybe you end up like, you thought at the start this is what you wanted, but now as you're sort of like getting on, it's like, yeah, I don't like nodes. Why did I go down this path? But if you really did, if like getting employed was your only goal, then, you know, the advice is different to like, I'm not sure, I want to find a good career. It's like, well, that's different. It's going to take you longer to maybe get employed, try a bunch of different things. But yeah, anyway.
No, it's true. I mean, at Art Center, I remember from like first term to third term, like once third term was over, so you do 3 terms. For us, that's like 3 semesters. Works in trimesters, like spring, summer, and fall, or spring, summer, winter, or something like that. And so a lot of people would just do year round, like you just go straight through. You don't take a summer break. And so that's 3 semesters in a row, like an absolute gauntlet for a year straight. And by the end of 3 terms, it was like you didn't even recognize people's work anymore. You're just like, Jesus, that's insane what you can accomplish in a year of that many hours, that much mileage. And not just mileage, but like first term at Art Center back then when we started was like the right balance. And I don't exactly know what the curriculum is for illustration now, but back then, in those days, it was the right balance of things and the right amount of work to really like, really test your ability to not get burned out, to stay fresh, and to manage your time, and to see just how far you can push stuff. Like, because you've never been asked to, no other school at that time. Again, this is 2001, so it's not the same as it is now. But back then, there's no other school that I know of in the entire United States that would push students to really extract the most performance out of them as much as Art Center did. And it just was like, I still talk about it. Still today? Oh, no. I'm just saying, I don't know. I haven't taught there in a while. It's been, it's been, I don't know, maybe 4 years since I taught there. But at the time, back then, it was really like, I was very proud to be around those individuals. And some of my the classmates, people that I was in school with, they went on to, have great careers, and just looking and just thinking back of how they were as a student, I always carried that with me of like, man, they were killers. They just like absolutely pushed it to a new level and inspired everyone around them. And so anyways, I try to keep that in mind as I progress throughout my my career. But it's all about mileage. If you're consistent, like you said, and you have a rigorous curriculum, you're going to see crazy results really fast.
Yeah, true. Well, I'm curious then. Let's say you had like a freshman at Art Center, and they dabbled, they've done some doodles, not good, but they wanted to get a job at Naughty Dog one day doing what you do, concept art. What would the curriculum look like? What should they start on, and what key areas should they hit on?
Well, first I would say, like, again, what's so easy about, it's not easy, but what is a huge beneficial factor of like the way that everything works now is if you want to work at a studio, i.e., Naughty Dog, Bungie, whatever studio you think is cool, Sucker Punch, look, you can go on ArtStation, you can find all those individuals who work there on that team in the department that you want to work in. You can look at all their work, and you can start like digesting that and doing studies and really looking at, and there's a very high likelihood that those people have tutorials out of exactly how they work. So it's not really that, you don't have to really reverse engineer it that much. But even if you didn't have any of that, I would break it apart as like, well, what skills you'd be able to, everybody knows at this point that you're going to use some 3D. If you're doing realistic representational art, it would be foolish to deny yourself at least some amount of 3D. And everyone has a different way they use it and a different amount that they use it. But to deny that to yourself would be not very smart. So I would say that that you're going to use some type of 3D. So get comfortable with 3D. What 3D do you use? These days it's going to be Blender is what you're going to use, because it's the only thing that makes sense to use as a concept artist.
Oh yeah.
And really a lot of other, not just concept artists, but all the other, I mean, it's really taken over. But you want to supplement that with something, right? You want with something. Just get comfortable with one thing first, and even like, let's just say that you're starting to learn some basic composition and some basic sketching and some basic painting. And once you get into Photoshop and you start learning a little bit more about that and you feel comfortable, then it's like, how do you and this is part of my classes I've taught in the past, how do you transition into going from 2D to now implementing 3D? Great question. Well, I would take your normal workflow. If you're going to do a painting, like let's say with a castle in a Irish, fantasy type of, Irish farmland rolling hills with clouds rolling in over the mountains, and some epic castle at the hill, at the top of the hill with sheep roaming around, whatever. Do everything else the way you would normally do it, but pick one element that you're going to use 3D for, and you're going to learn the workflow to create that one element to then bring into your piece, right? To bring that.
Do you mean like creating a rock,
a castle, like
something
just
like that?
Yeah, like model a simple like a simple tower, not like an entire city, some crazy like Game of Thrones, entire city, but maybe it's just a simple castle with one main central tower that has some flying buttress type of structures, or whatever, obviously something that would make sense for that image, and then go through the tutorials and like your stuff, or whatever the beginning tutorials would be, and reverse engineer how to make that. And then by the time you're done learning how to make that one, it's the donut tutorial, but for something else. It's what does it take to learn how to make that? You have to go through all the steps of learning those things to make that thing to bring into your painting, because that's what you do as a concept artist. You're never gonna do all one thing. It's always gonna be a hybrid of 2D, 3D, generally speaking, unless you just like hit that 3-pointer from half court and everything just works out in 3D and you're like, all right, let's just render and that's done. That usually is not the case. Not usually. For us, it doesn't make sense to do that all the time. It's for a number of different reasons. But
and why is that, by the way? Yeah, like what do you normally do with a 3D render that you feel is maybe faster or better to do in 2D?
Well, let's keep it on your Last of Us question. So, like, let's say you were... So, sorry, I totally deviated into, like, Scottish castle territory, but let's just say you were doing a destroyed building covered in ivy. Last of Us, that's the special. If you can't do that, you can never work at Naughty Dog. So, you have you got to be able to do overgrowth on top of destruction. So nice. What would be... Doing that all in 3D would require some pretty slick tools. Like, I've seen some tutorials, and I've seen stuff that you've posted as well. Some great techniques for destruction, and some Boolean operations, some various different ways to make things look pretty believable, and to add, whether you're using IVGen or using SpeedTree or you're using whatever 3D software. You think of all these various different tools that you would need in order to do that in 3D, and then you realize, like, yes, but I could render out the silhouette of this building that as it is, what the block mesh is, or what the environment artists have spec'd it out to be like, and the entire background plate doesn't have to. You could just use one photo, a really, really good one, and then augment that with more like trees and more photos on top of it, and maybe switch the sky out or whatever. But that whole background, there's no need for that all to be 3D, because the process in 3D to get that to look as good as the rest of your work would take so long, compared to just drop in a nice photo, adjust the sky, maybe cut the sky out, replace it with a different sky, but the trees are working pretty nicely, splice in some new trees on top of that. That process takes an hour, like what I just described, versus getting all those trees up and running. Like, obviously, if you have everything already set up, you can, you've got your asset library, you're dragging trees in, you're getting the lighting right. I understand that, and that a lot of people do that, and it looks great. My argument is, if you can make it look better with a photo, and it's hard to make something look better than a well-exposed, beautifully shot photograph. And I take a lot of them myself, by the way, those things that I would use in those paintings. A lot of it's like reference that I shot myself. I'm like, driving up to Lake Arrowhead, gee, that tree line is so dope. That's just the way the clouds are coming over. Yeah, why change that? That works perfectly. You need pine trees. You need that type of rocky mountain landscape, and you need some clouds. That time of day works. Drag that in. That's done. Now your 3D asset is something else. Now you're rendering that to match the background, which is sort of like if you projection mapped a plate and you're trying to render it so that it looked about like the background. It's not that different, right? You got an HDR that approximates what your background is doing, and then you kind of, and then once you have that in place, you can bring that into Photoshop, and then adjust the values to perfectly match your shot. Now you have something that, let's just say we're talking about Last of Us, the destruction aspect of it. You've got to create believable destruction. Now, let's just say you've got some mega scans, you've got some piles of rubble that look beautiful, plaster and brick and stuff that matches your thing, and you're instancing those around to make rubble around the bottom of the building. again, can you make that look as good as a perfect photo of rubble in the lighting that you already need? It's hard. You can. An absolute master can, but to do it really fast, if you already know you have your epic library of references that you use for that project that you're on, you're not going to be able to do it faster and better doing it. But there are elements that 3D is essential for. Complicated structures with lighting, with all these parallax and overlaps and whatever else is going on. Again, I don't want to be the one to paint that from scratch. I want to use 3D for that.
Right.
So to me, there's always what is the tool good for, and what is it best at? And I want to hybridize that and make the best workflow that brings them together, if that makes sense.
And that is a skill set as well that not everyone has. Some people are very rigid with their workflow and like, well, I only know 3D, so I mean, I'm modeling a tree now. I'm like, why are you modeling? Like, there's so many other things you could do. It's and you learn that like the professionals, the true professionals who are just like crushing it at speaking at every event and everything. Those people, you ask them what software they use, they're like, for what? It's like they've got like 30 pieces of software and they'll do one little tiny aspect in this and then this and this and jump around and knowing like what part needs to be 3D because this shot needs to be potentially relit or from a different camera angle, so I won't photo bash that element. I'll do that with 3D, and all that stuff is expertise that is it's hard to replace, I guess. Yeah. Pro tip for artists: learn how to use your time efficiently. If you are spending time making a shader that you've already built 100 times before, that is time not spent somewhere else more important. Poliigon solves this by giving you access to over 5,000 assets which are plug and play. Shaders, models, and HDRIs that are created to a reliable, consistent standard so you don't have to waste any time fixing them. And with our new Blender add-on, you can search, download, and import assets directly into your scene from your sidebar, meaning you can keep your focus where it needs to be, which is making good art. You can try 100 assets for free by clicking the link in the description or by going to Poliigon, Poliigon.com, and signing up for a free account.
If you're aiming for one particular studio, I also kind of urge people to not do that, because the problem is that as you know, getting a job at a particular studio, a lot of that is timing, and there might not be a spot open at that time. You might be great, but sometimes there isn't a spot open. So I would say, don't do what looks like a fan art portfolio. Do a couple pieces that look like they're very applicable to that studio, and then do your own thing, which is also showing amazing skills that are maybe applicable, but not literally like I'm doing a piece from The Last of Us, or I'm doing a piece from Destiny, or I'm doing a piece from Ghost of Tsushima. I'm doing a really dope image, and they can see the skills in it, could easily transfer to their thing, but there maybe are a couple images in your portfolio which are pretty close, and it's like, oh, okay, so they can absolutely handle dense foliage and overgrowth and rubble and destruction, and their treatment of, they're not using random tropical plants mixing with alpine pine trees, like things that you would just not, you would know not to do that. You would learn to do something authentic that feels like you did some research. You know what type of biome you're creating. You know what type of architecture exists in that biome. Like something that where it's like, oh, okay, that there's a lot of thought that went into that. That's the sort of stuff that they would be looking at that studio. Naughty Dog, I mean.
Yeah.
They would want someone that can demonstrate all those different things. And the way they wouldn't care how you did it, to be honest. That's not even it. Like you could be a photo bash absolute master. Maciej Kuciara, for example, I would say he kind of defined that look of concept art for The Last of Us from the first game, which is when I started working there back in 2011.
Okay.
And he was already there, and he already
What was the game?
It was for The Last of Us 1, the first one.
Oh, Last of Us 1. Okay.
But it wasn't called that.
Who?
It didn't have a title yet. It was just what we were doing next. It was
okay.
our next project, but we didn't know it was that. But anyways, that was that was what it was.
And what was the name you said? Masakuchiyo?
Mache. Macieej is how it's spelled. And his last name is Kuchihara.
And what does he do?
He's a pretty gangster concept artist, I would say, is his official title.
Okay. Official title.
He's he's an art now. He's art directing and doing concept art as well, and he's just a pioneer of a lot of different things. But that look that everyone knows for The Last of Us, that look of all of our concept art, which we all kind of developed together over the years, and we all kind of speak this. We all do it differently, but we all have a certain understanding that you could give any one of us a piece, and it would probably be usable to a certain degree in the same way, because we would there's certain things we would just know to do. I feel he's the one who's owed credit for the very genesis of that way of working. And I learned a lot from sitting next to him for the years that I did. But in the beginning, those very early pieces that people remember from the first game, if you go back and look at these, and they're still good even today, there was not any 3D involved in that. If someone turned that in and that was what their work looked like, I would be like, I don't care how you did it. It's amazing. Obviously you would encourage someone to, hey, look, if you hired someone, you'd encourage them to want to grow and be like, what you could do if you learned some 3D with these skills, you would be a monster. And then they would, and it would be no problem at all. You could help them learn. That's what I would do if I hired someone like that was 2013 Mache, and that was what his skills were. I'd be like, I got to get you. I will happily dedicate some time to help you learn some basic 3D, and it will launch you into another realm with those 2D skills that you already have. So to bring back the conversation to what we were saying is like, it doesn't really matter how you do it, but you need some array of some simple 3D skills that solve the various different things. For me, it's Blender. I love Blender's modeling tools. It's phenomenal. I like to render in Octane. I love Octane, and I think I don't enjoy Blender's node system as much as the simplicity of Octane. It's just my personal preference. But obviously, if I could magically teleport myself to have as good of an understanding of Blender as I do of Octane, I probably would, and I would just make it so it was all in one thing. Anyways, that's Blender, Octane. I use 3D Coat for my sculpting when I do some hard surface, more complex stuff that would take a lot longer to Poliigon model. Marvelous. I'm trying to think you don't really need much else. You can, if you want to learn some other stuff, you can learn some terrain, gen, something like that. There's all these other amazing character creator programs like Character Creator, MetaHuman. Like, there's crazy stuff that's like very useful for other things. DAZ, obviously, it's a pain in the ass, but sometimes you have to use it. What else do you need? You don't need. It's not essential to have more things than that. You can, but I feel it's about starting with a base, which would be Blender. That's your base. And then expanding tools from there where you need them. Like, you want to learn Marvelous to drape something over to, again, Last of Us. You build a decontamination tent. Well, you can model those with polygons if you want to punish yourself, or you could just do a sim in Marvelous and have the most incredible looking, tarp.
Yeah.
So anyways, you just learn those tools as they're needed.
Yeah. That's right. Interesting. So was this? I feel like we kind of diverged maybe a little bit going back. We're talking about the curriculum for a concept artist. So you're saying you start, if you're doing a Scottish landscape with a castle, pick an element, make it 3D. And do you just is that to build up the 3D skill set, or is it, I don't know, where do you go? And are you assuming that, I guess obviously they're having mentorship to kind of guide them? But I don't know, at Art Center, maybe a broader question, what are the main modules? Is it, storytelling, design language, shape language? Is that all important? And if so, in what order?
Oh man, that's these are one of the most difficult when you're designing a curriculum for a class. That's one of the most difficult things you can do is figure out what order is the order of importance, because they're all so important.
It is.
I think story should be number one. What's your idea? If you had to tell your friend an elevator pitch, which for people that haven't heard that term before, it's just like if you had a 1-minute elevator ride, could you tell your story? How would you talk to your friend and explain what you're doing to them without rambling on and on and on and sharing unnecessary details? But what's the essence of your story? That should be number one. What's your idea? Then comes the research first. Then the next step would be do some research on those things. If it's like the idea we just said before, Scotland. All right. Well, you would know a lot of various different things about the type of landscape Scotland has and what they look like on the coast of Scotland. You wouldn't see like something that looks like you stole photos from the Appalachians or the Rockies in with tall peaks and pine. Like you just wouldn't see that there. You see these soft rolling hills with these stone walls that farmers used to partition their land so that they could keep their livestock away from the other dude's livestock or whatever, and these little stone walls crawling up over the hills. You would learn that by looking at lots of reference. You'd see like, oh, this is what I'm typically seeing there. And then you'd look at architecture. All right, now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole on architecture. It could be Pinterest, it could be Google, whatever. And I have a good understanding of what Scottish castles could possibly be. And then there's the geology of the rock, the type of rock that you would see there. Like are we showing cliffs? Are we showing broken sheared off cliff sides spilling into the ocean and stuff like that? You do all the research necessary to have a good understanding. If you're designing a fantasy environment that is based on that, like if you're shooting the movie there, but you're going to add some elements like Game of Thrones and make a fantasy thing, that would be a pretty good place to start. And then you would now get into the designing part. You would have to know all that stuff first, which isn't, by the way, I'm not talking about like days and days of work. I'm talking about a couple hours of like dive into the material, understand what you're looking at. What type of lighting do you want to do? Do you want Scotland? It's often pretty overcast and it can be very heavy, a lot of moisture in the air and then heavy clouds that are creeping over the mountains, or the hills and stuff like that. Like that's
what do you call this skill? Is it like design language? Is it
it's just the reference gathering part of it, to be honest. It's like, well, it's different. So like it's design language in one sense of like, now I'm understanding the types of shapes. Like if you had to do like a shape breakdown made up of silhouettes, like what does a Scottish castle look like versus a Gothic castle that you'd see in Wales or something like that, or England? They would look different. There'd be some, or even you want to go even further, like a Gothic type of castle that you'd see in France. They like their Gothic architecture there, and those shapes would look very different as a silhouette. It would look super different. That would be the design language part of it, I would say. Understanding or if you were going to do a silhouette of like the rolling hills on like the cliffs of Moher in Ireland, like the way the hills are so soft and rolling, and then it just gets cut off, and the way that you can tell that the way they sheared off and broke into the ocean, that's a language that if you were working on a game or a film or an animated film for that matter, that wanted to capture that character of that environment, they would have a really solid understanding of the shape language of curve to straight, or soft edges and rolling sweeping curves to jagged broken edge. And that rhythm would be essential to designing that environment of the cliffs of, like Moher, for example.
Did you work on Uncharted 4?
I did. Yes.
Right. Did you design some of the Scottish level, the Scottish Highlands level?
I did. I worked on that a little bit. It was more Eitan than me. It was more Eitan.
Okay.
He was like the master of that kind of that area, that level. But I did work on some. It was a very fun, fun level to work on.
I was going to say, talking about the Scottish Highlands, I'm like, that was a really good level, and I'm like, yeah, that was also at Naughty Dog. You might have designed some of that.
Yeah. We definitely we all kind of dabbled. We all touched like all the levels, but it wasn't the one that I didn't focus on that as much. Eitan really owned that one, I feel.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Which games did you work on at Naughty Dog?
Starting with, so when I started, I didn't know what I was going to work on. They wouldn't tell me, but I was like, I mean, I can't be bad, because they had just made Uncharted 2, which absolutely blew my mind and changed my whole perspective on what a game could be.
Oh, true.
So
wow, cool.
I went there right after Uncharted 2 came out, and they were working on Uncharted 3. I did my I did my like test. They wanted to see because okay, so here's just to start with how I got in there. I had been doing nothing but robots and alien planet, Cybertron stuff for the last like 4 years. So they wanted to see like, well, okay, obviously I did realistic stuff in the past, but how would you do that stuff now today? Because it's not what I had been doing up to that point. So I was like, all right, I'm down to do a test. So I did one image that was based in Yemen, and it did like a marketplace, like an outdoor bazaar marketplace kind of thing. And so that was for Uncharted 3. They wouldn't tell me what I was actually going to be working on, but they were like, well, this is what we're doing right now, so let's see that you could do it. Anyway, so that's what I did. And then I got there, and then they showed me the game, what would become The Last of Us. And I was like, oh, shit, this is a totally different thing. I had no idea that you were making something that's not at all what I thought you were going to be doing. Because it's, much more dark and serious and emotional and mature and all those things. I love Uncharted still to this day, and I wouldn't mind working on an Uncharted game to this day if I don't work there anymore. But if I did, and if that was something they were doing, I wouldn't be bummed about it because it's just a fun universe. But I ended up working on The Last of Us. So technically, I did not work on Uncharted 3. Worked on The Last of Us 1. Then we moved on to Uncharted 4. I did not work on Left Behind. I worked on The Lost Legacy, and then Last of Us 2. I think that was the order. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the order. And Last of Us 2 was a beast. That was a long project.
Yeah, how long was that?
Maybe like 6 years total, including like the very beginning sandbox stuff, like the little test levels and prototypes and whatever else. I don't know, maybe 6 years, I think.
True. The cost of production of that game, because like you're playing it and you're like, this is like 4 games in one. It's like, it's the best deal you can get, by the way, guys. If you want a game that's just like, it's the longest, it's huge.
Yeah, I don't even know.
It takes you like from start to finish, like a month to finish or something. Just the campaign.
I'm slow. I'm really slow. Yeah. So when they say like if a tester plays through it in 40 hours or however long that it takes, I will take like 80 hours. Like I will take forever.
Right.
But anyway,
I was also like just enjoying it, just like chilling out, walking around, looking at the scenery.
That's how I play every game. That's
it's a technical marvel.
Yeah. That's how I play I love playing games like that. It's just really soaking it up. Like a game like that or a game like Ghost of Tsushima, where it's really rewarding to look around and just like that's crazy. Like those quiet moments are really fun. That's a cool thing about it.
That is true. Yeah, it is interesting that like there's this sort of desire for that kind of element in games now. Like what is it, like Euro Truck Simulator? Like people love it because it's mundane. Like it's actually a de-stressing part of the day from having to go at work to just sit and just kind of like do almost nothing. It's like it's really interesting, just kind of like that psychology. But then on the other side, you've got everything has to be high engagement, TikTok and But then it's like people are like just chill out a little bit.
Yeah, that's more like
hang out,
more like a first-person shooter kind of thing, where it's like it's very twitchy, it's very fast, and it's very like in your face, and it's just nonstop. It's either that or it could be like Doom, where it's like it's super quiet, and then it's going to scare the shit out of you any moment, for just a little while or something. But yeah, this is more like I think some people enjoy the type of game that it feels immersive in the sense that a lot of if you were to go on a huge hike, like a lot of it is just taking everything in, and making the environment really rewarding, whether it's an abandoned, a temple that's thousands, a couple thousand years old or 1,000 years old, or it's a destroyed hospital that is dripping water through it like a waterfall because, it's raining outside and you're trying to climb up these collapsing, staircases or whatever. There's a lot of fun to be had in just like the exploration aspect of games, I think, as opposed to just all nonstop engagement intensity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's Naughty Dog does it so well. It's really, really something. So you were at Naughty Dog for 11 years.
That's right.
And when you left you said recently to
yeah,
join Activision.
Yeah, so I'm a world art director for Activision Blizzard, and that was in June. I started.
Okay, interesting. Straight from there to Activision. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Cool.
Yeah, took a little break, took a few weeks off just to regenerate a little bit, but yeah, I was not burned out. I was not tired. I was like ready to roll. I'm like, I'm ready to get to some business now. So I just I took a little bit of a break, but I went back to work.
Yeah, awesome. That's cool. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I spent 11 years there. It's a long time.
Yeah, it is, but it's yeah, you must have learned a lot during that time as well.
Most definitely.
Put through the
definitely
ropes.
Did, yeah.
Yeah. Curious, since everyone's talking about it still, it's all the rage. AI. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Let's do that.
What do you... maybe to just start with the obvious question. Do you think that AI will be replacing concept art anytime soon?
Nope.
Tell me why.
Okay. This is an interesting topic because every so often, and it's becoming more quickly, the intervals as technology increases, but it's the same thing as you see with everything else. It is incredible what it can do, and it is getting better. However, it's what you can see an AI image very quickly now that we've seen them a lot and people are posting them a lot. You can recognize it very quickly because what it can't do, and I don't know how you could ever program it to do this, I don't really know how to say it, but the spontaneity that an individual, like, okay, my friend group of concept artists, we can all achieve an end result that is a comparable result, but the way that we go about it is our own personal taste, like our human individual aspect of why we like to do things a certain way. And sometimes we're stubborn, sometimes we're scared to try something different, sometimes we just love the way this one thing is. It's about patterns, and it's about our human imperfections.
Okay.
There are choices that you make that are very unique to each person, and that most of them, I could tell which one of them did which image, even though they're like, maybe the public wouldn't know because they don't know those little quirks and those little things that they tend to do. Those little hits, those brush strokes, or those little, various different, they like spec that's doing this on the whatever. AI is incredible at pulling an amalgamation of everything and doing some pretty tricky blending and photo bashing and creating some interesting effects. I'm not saying it's not very useful. I think it actually should be used for a lot of different things. I just don't think it will ever be able to create the character of somebody who invented a style, someone like Alberto Mielgo or someone like Mache or someone like Eitan. I don't think that AI will be able to replicate the choices that those individuals make. It'll be able to crap out 100,000 images relatively quickly that you could pick the one that you like the best, but it can't point and shoot. It's like a sniper being one of those individuals. You know what you're going to get out of them because they just know how to do that. So AI should be used. You shouldn't, when there's an amazing, impressive tool, you shouldn't lean away from it. You should lean into it. If you are scared of being replaced by something like that, all I would say to someone like that is just figure out how you can use it to your benefit and keep doing what you were already doing, and just use it to make you better somehow. How is that? It can.
You look for the opportunity in it.
Yeah.
Not the threat.
I'll tell you what it's really good at. It's really good at coming up with really unique compositions. So let's just say something that people do that are not super experienced yet in terms of making environmental compositions, they tend to think that, atmospheric perspective. Oh, you make a dark silhouette, and then when it goes in the background, it gets a little bit lighter. And then it goes further back, it gets a little bit lighter. Okay, that's one type of composition. But when you study the old masters, or you study the people like Edgar Payne, people who have broken down composition to a level of just insane level of understanding, you realize there's so many other types of composition. Well, now what kids are going to do learning is, instead of go and read Composition in Outdoor Painting by Edgar Payne and like break down every possible different, is it medium against light with a dark foreground? Is it light against dark with a medium foreground? Like, is it what, all the different compositions, the pyramid composition, the circle, the S composition, there's all these different like rules in the academic side of like making cool compositions, right? Well, what they will start doing is they will start using AI to come up with interesting scenery, interesting shapes, interesting ways that the composition can flow, and it'll be very, very instant, and it will be that it will automatically do that thinking for you of like, I saw something the other day, someone posted something like, I don't even remember the prompt, but it was like, yeah, the images were not like, I would not share that as concept art. It looks unfinished and it looks generic, but the actual compositions of those, what the prompts made were like, I mean, it would take you some time to generate that many different, totally different ideas for composition alone. The characters aren't right. The sky is not quite right. The colors are a good start. The colors can be incredible if you're like, I want to mix Deacons with Miyazaki. Like, oh shit, well that could create some interesting results. You know, like whatever it is that you're into, you can create a very good starting point if you already have the other skills that you can then use that to integrate it into what your pipeline of what you're already doing. And nobody would ever be able to know that you used AI to figure the composition out. It doesn't even matter how you got there.
That's true. It's very true.
Or coming up with a badass color palette. That too.
It is true. It is one of those differences. Some people look for opportunities, as you mentioned, using it to find unique compositions.
What do you think about it?
I think exactly the same. I think people are generally overestimating the skill of the AI and underestimating the artist that directed the AI to create a pleasing image. Like that big debate about the artist who won an art competition. That one, it was like, I don't know if people who are against that have actually tried the AI tools, because getting that result is not easy. In fact, for a lot of people, it might actually take longer than doing it the old way, the traditional way. Because, like, I mean, I was using it recently for a project, using AI to try and, like, it was like trying to come up with this, like, you know, this minimalistic design aesthetic poppy style that's like popular for a lot of advertising. I was trying to do something like that, and I was like typing in prompts into AI, and I got some like interesting, as you said, some interesting compositions, some interesting ideas. It had like some curtains with this silvering effect. I'm like, that's kind of cool. But overall, I'm like, this is like, it was actually faster to type it into Pinterest, pick some pleasing ideas, and then build it in Blender. But that's not to say that it's completely useless. It's
not everybody's as good at Blender as you are, man. I think I would die if I had to create some of these things. I don't know how I would do it.
Right.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's I think it's very, very interesting. Though at the same time I do understand, like, because like somebody was saying, like, my point was, like, it's really no different to like an art director directing a team of artists. It's almost like that. It's given anybody in the world for free a budget to hire a bunch of artists on Fiverr. Basically, it's like you've just given each of them $10,000 and hired a bunch of artists, and they can just do it, because that's kind of what it's doing. It's just like, it's that. But at the same time, when you're leading a bunch of artists on Fiverr or when you're guiding AI, there is a difference between painting it or doing it yourself versus directing it. There is a slight stipulation there. So it does kind of get a little bit hairy when it's like, who made this? It's like, well, the AI made it, but it was guided by another person. We've kind of got this, maybe a little bit of an old-fashioned kind of, maybe one day it'll be seen as old-fashioned to kind of think of like who the owner of what is, who did what. But it is true. It's like, an art director or somebody guiding AI is not. It's not technically true to call yourself the artist. Although, but what else would you call it? You know, I don't know. You know what I'm getting at? It's like because that whole discussion of like ownership and did you do it or not. I don't actually think it really matters. To be fair, it's just a lot of people like online. Maybe it's just like wanting to shoot down people, but it's like you didn't do that. You know,
it's always the thing. It's like saying. It's like when people started doing digital painting, people started saying, "Oh, well, the computer's doing everything." Oh, really? Oh, is it?
Yeah,
it's not that. It's
right.
Because again, like you said, they don't have an understanding of what it takes to make that. So they think that. I'm not going to say that it's not harder to paint it with acrylic or oil. Of course, it's harder, but it's not a walk in the park to just create like super epic wide concept with all these custom elements just because it's digital. There's the tools are you need to learn how they behave and how to implement them in the best way possible. This is I know why people have a problem with it because it's yes, they're trying to shoot it down. A lot of people are purists and a lot of people see it as a threat or they see it as like, oh, it's cheating or it's always the same narrative whenever a new thing comes out that's like really changes the game like that. But I am always just like, well, yeah, I'm always just like, well, look, there are some things about it and you can't deny that it does that AI in general does that are pretty incredible. That I think we can learn from it. I think if anything, you can learn from it, and why not just implement it? If you're so against it, I would ask, like, why? What is it? Yes, if you're just looking at everyone's posting on Instagram and you're like, all right, it looks like the same person doing 1,000 images it's really kind of the same person doing it. It does look like that at times. But then I've seen some friends who've shown me stuff where I'm like, I can't even tell that's like, it really is pretty gnarly. It's true. Insane. It's really good.
It's true.
So there is skill to that. And to that, I would say, there was a time when people said that painting over photos for your concepts was cheating. That couldn't be far from the common thought now. But there was a time when people thought, no, you can't. I literally have heard people stand up on a stage and tell an entire audience, you can't do that. You can't use a photo into painting. Well, dude, you wouldn't be working if you would not work in movies if you couldn't do that. Like, what are we talking about here? We are using a computer. Is that cheating? Like, what's the point of having these conversations at a certain point? It's like things are going to change. No, I'm not saying to you. Let's not. I'm saying the conversation of accusing someone of cheating or saying that it's like maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe you're the owner, maybe you're not. Does it, like you said before, does it matter? Does it really matter? It's a thing that isn't real and it's not going away. So why not just like see if you can use it or don't, and see how if you can not use it and you still get the same result, who cares? It doesn't. But to automatically demonize it or say that it's like a bad thing, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. We're all already using AI, by the way, because Photoshop, if you're using content-aware fill or you're using some type of something that's using a tricky algorithm that is doing some magic stuff, or gigapixel AI taking an image and blowing it up way bigger and it's holding up just fine for throwing into your concept art painting, that's using AI. So is that cheating? You can't tell that I did that.
Oh yeah.
So who cares?
In 2 years, this part of the interview will seem very dated.
Yeah. But I love it. I think it's great.
The idea of like using AI, it's like, well, everything is now got AI in it. There's actually a guy, Kevin Kelly, wrote a book about 10 years ago. It was like the 10 forces that'll change the next decade or something like that, the next 30 years of progress. And one of them was that much like how in was it 100 years ago? When was electricity invented? I don't know.
I think it was
people got
the year
rich.
1100 AD. I just made that up.
Really?
I just totally made
that up. I was like, damn, I was way off. It was basically men of the past got rich by taking an existing technique and then adding electricity to it. So you take a water pump and then you add electricity to it. Now it's an electrified water pump, right? The next decades will be the same thing, but for AI. You got a camera that takes pictures. Now the AI is in the camera taking better pictures. AI will be in probably all the tools that we eventually use. And in a way, it's really not that different to just technological progress. Like, as an example, like 5 years ago, maybe it might even be less than that, 3 years ago, the Blender didn't have the principled shader, right? Which I don't know if it's too technical for you, but and so the only way to create a realistic shader was you had to build everything from scratch. You had to have a diffuse shader, then you had to mix it with a gloss shader, and you had to mix it. But you also had to know that it's not just like a simple mix value because of the material properties. At a glancing angle, there's more gloss because of Fresnel, so you had to infuse it with a Fresnel thing. But you also had to know that when the roughness of a material goes up, when something gets rougher, that affects the Fresnel. It now becomes like more powerful, right? So it starts to come across. So you had to program all of these things into it. So I figured out the math, or actually other people helped me. I'm not very good at math myself, but figured out the math to make this very complex shader and sort of shrink it down to this one little node group, which did it all. But it took a lot of time to figure out the science behind it, the physics of it. And then Blender came out with the principled shader. And now it does it without even thinking about it. When you increase the roughness in this principled shader, it's automatically upping the Fresnel in the background. It's doing all of it without you even knowing that it's happening. And that's how it's always been with everything that we've got in software. Rotoscoping tools start like snapping to areas of the picture, right? It's just you would call it like machine creep, like just machine learning, just like creeping into the things that we do. I think the reason that makes tools like Dolly and Midjourney different is that it's not like a step forward, it seems to be a leap forward, where it's doing something that has never been done before, which is generate an entire image from scratch. And that if it came slower and was maybe like good at like a few things, maybe early on, nothing else, maybe it did like product design, or you could only design cars, or you could only design shoes, or maybe you could only pick from pictures, and it was like incremental, I feel like people wouldn't have that big of an issue with it. But it's because it feels like almost overnight there was a technological change that seemed to have usually taken about 10 years that people went, whoa, what's going on here, you know?
Yep.
And for sure, like it took a lot of us by surprise, rightly so, because it is the closest thing to magic I think I've seen in a long time.
You know? It really did exceed our understanding of like it's hard to believe that it can do that based on such little information.
It is.
The prompt is not that,
Yes.
you know, it's not that much information that you're giving it, and it just pulls everything from everywhere and just like brrr, done. It is pretty remarkable.
And to do it coherently, to not just like make this mess of like images with different perspective and like a car that doesn't have any shape because there's no depth to it. It's like it's actually able to understand I don't know what you'd call it, the depth, the context of what it is that it's building, the angle of what it is, and everything else that's in it has to match that perspective.
Yep.
It's very, very complicated.
Like, and so just
they pulled a rabbit out of a hat with this software. It's magic.
Yeah,
really.
it is the closest thing to magic, and I think the real way that it will be implemented, and the most logical way, and I know they will try. Like, if you, for example, to answer your question, will it replace concept artists? If you were to take a movie, a production designer, and you say there are no concept artists, there are no illustrators from the union on this project, it is the production designer and then the rest of the team, and you say AI is going to create every shot in the movie. I mean, let's just be honest here. You wouldn't have as much control as you think you do. It wouldn't come out as good as you think, because it would be dictating some of the things to you. Like the whole point of being a designer, and this is like a lot of great teachers I've had have said this, and I still hear people say it today, is just that you want to transcend the tools and the technology. Like it shouldn't be dictating what the end result is, because if you don't know it well enough to make it do what you want. So it's kind of like you're not able to quite do what you want. So it's kind of making you, it's shorting you a little bit. And so that's you settling for the end result because it's not exactly what you wanted. I think that is exactly what would happen, is that you would end up with something that wasn't exactly what you probably wanted, but it's cool, it's fine, but I think you will use AI to have a very long conversation with the team about what the goals are by looking at all these different things that can be generated really fast without any hiring any people, and then you'll do the real work and the real work may entail artists that are using AI to create elements of their work, but I don't think you will ever be at the point where it's like, I want to make a movie about, the epic bank heist from a bunch of guys who grew up together in Boston, and they're gonna rob every single bank in Boston and blah blah. And what, like, how does if you're okay with it, you not being the creator? I don't think a director or a production designer would be okay with them not controlling and tuning all these independent aspects of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Kind of.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking.
It does.
That's what I'm thinking. I might eat my words, but I don't. That's what I think.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I like that. You shouldn't let software dictate what it is you do. That's very true. You can see it in a sort of, it's really common, every beginner, including myself early on, like using a tool without really understanding what it's doing to the image, Like, simple one, like chromatic aberration, right? You're trying to make like this really like filmic, beautiful, like Hollywood color grade shot, but then you've got a whole bunch of chromatic aberration. Well, chromatic aberration is really only seen on cheap cameras and cheap lenses. So if you're going for a Hollywood look, it wouldn't have that amount of chromatic aberration. Motion blur, you wouldn't have it in a brightly lit scene that much because you wouldn't have that much exposure because it's about shutter speed. So you have to understand what it is you're doing, or else you can just end up with something that just doesn't make any sense. And I think for sure that is the difference between an artist using an AI tool and somebody just picking it up and just typing in a prompt. Yeah. Yes, they'll have something that looks like a painting, but they could not get it any direction that they wanted it to. They wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know what prompts to give it to improve it, to correct that thing that they don't even know is an issue.
Yeah, if you wanted something very specific and you wanted to have a bunch of different takes on that one thing, let's say you wanted like people, like kids in Tibet, a bunch of kids carrying water up a mountain, like up a stone staircase with like goats jumping around, and you're like something very specific, like, and you typed in the type of lighting and you typed in the type of atmosphere and the color, and you even want it based on this type of cinematography, whatever. You get a lot of different ideas, but none of those would be ready to go, like right off, like that idea is now ready to go, ready for prime time. But if you had a skilled artist and then you had a production designer do all those prompts and say, like, this is kind of like the sort of stuff that I like, and then this is the other reference, these are the actual movie references that I was basing that on, and these are the painters that I was basing that on, and they had all that, and they had all these AI explorations, I wouldn't mind having that as like a starting point of like, all right, I'm not doing that exact thing, but there's some cool stuff going on in that render that you got out of Midjourney or DALL-E or whatever. And so that's my starting point. That's a kind of a sick composition, how it comes to a spike at the top and it makes us feel more planted and that we're ascending upwards, and it's like a metaphor for ascending upwards into heaven or some like, that's a cool starting place. I can't say that that's not beneficial in some way, shape, or form. It could be. I just don't think it's the end result. There's more to be done,
Definitely. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think much like digital tools entering into the traditional art realm, I think AI will be like that in 5 to 10 years. There won't be an artist on the planet that's not using these tools and leveraging them to assist their work, basically.
Yeah, for sure. So
yeah,
I think it's just another tool, and it's another thing that will be really interesting to see how it develops from where we're at right now, because we're seeing progress, like even in the last couple months when it was like Midjourney, and now like all these different ones are coming out, and they're all good at different things and doing different, in different ways, but they're all pretty impressive in their own right. And I think maybe they're all useful in some way, especially if you are already a good artist and you have other skills that can complement that. you could never tell if someone was a really good painter and they used something that was an AI based thing and then they riffed off it and developed it and changed it. And how would you ever know that that was what they started with? You wouldn't know. Never.
Yeah, that's true.
If you painted over all of it and changed the sky, changed all the weird things that are not quite like the machine, it didn't get it and it like messed up, and you fix all that and you paint over it all. I don't know, man. I don't know if you could tell.
That's true. I think for sure that's already happening, probably on ArtStation.
Oh yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you, right?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's just like traditional tools long ago. People frowned upon Photoshop being introduced, and currently they're frowning upon Midjourney, but I think people will laugh at that.
I'm like, and then the answers to me, it's always the same. It's like, all right, well, this is the way I looked at it since when I like came out of school. I'm like, all right, well, look, everything that I thought I was going to be doing, like I was probably born a little bit too late. Like I would have loved to be like a background painter at like one of the animation studios, like working on like, in the golden age of animation, doing these like epic backgrounds and painting them. I that's what I thought I wanted to do when I was like 19. And then everything I learned in school, I learned a lot of those techniques in school, and I went through like the gauntlet of painting in school. And by the time I came out of school, that's like, no, that's not what you're going to do anymore. So what I learned from that is, okay, look, it's like the guys who, when the airbrush became out of style, in the 80s, everyone was airbrushing those like really bad, like chrome dolphins or whatever people were doing. Once that became out of style, if you refused to stop using the airbrush and just like learn how to change your look, you're not working anymore. That's over. So it's the same thing.
That's true.
And it'll be like, if you have to compartmentalize what is in your heart. Like if you like the traditionalist approach or some other thing, do that. You can still do that. But professionally, the industry is going to dictate to you some things that people want to see. And if you refuse to do that, well, you're sort of, cutting off your nose to spite your face sort of thing,
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Yeah, if you're relying on, anything that isn't your own project, it's like you got to do what the boss wants. They're the one paying you, Yeah,
and it'll make some things easier. Like 3D, like starting to use 3D, some of the things, the architectural arrays of columns and things that are like very architecturally complex that you as soon as you start using 3D, you realize like it doesn't mean that you have to not use the skills that you had before. You still get to use all the things that you already knew. You're just adding one more trick in the bag that maybe can make some aspect easy for you that is a difficult struggle of the process that was previously a struggle, and now it will be easy. You can use it just for what you want to use it for. I think people lack some like they tend to think about certain things like this very simplistically. Like no one ever said it has to be what everyone is saying it is. It could be done in a way that's very tasteful and elegant, and you could not even tell. Like there's so many applications for it that are not. Everyone's thinking of it in this reductive way that like it means that now concept art is a prompt and that's the end of the conversation. Close the book and we're done. No one ever said that. It's not what it is. It's just a talking point. It's the beginning of a new conversation.
Some journalists do.
Well, I don't. Yeah, they can. Journalists don't even get me started on journalists, man.
It is funny seeing them dip their toes into the art world and realizing like, wow, they don't understand this. Is it possible they don't understand the other stuff they're writing about?
I wonder if journalists is not everything I read on the internet true. That can't be the case. It can't be true.
Yeah, exactly. That's
funny.
Right. Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy, man. But I'm glad you brought it up. I didn't think about it, but it's a good conversation, and I think people will like hearing about all these different takes on it because it's here to stay.
Yeah, it definitely is. Wow.
Yeah, man.
Well, that might be a good area to leave on, actually. Where can people find you, Aaron?
So I'm mostly on Instagram. My ArtStation recent artworks. I've been, doing more, obviously the last several years I've been moving in more of an art direction type of position, so I'm not generating art as much as frequently as I would like, but my Instagram has all my like sketchbook stuff on it and a lot of my current workshops, tutorials, all that sort of stuff on it as well. And then ArtStation's just the old classic platform that we all tend to find ourselves on. I'd say those two awesome. Are the most common places to find me.
Great.
Hopefully I'll be able to say one day, where will you find me? Well, you'll find me in a little boat on Lake Como, and I don't have a whole lot to do today. I'm just gonna have a glass of red wine and just see which side of the lake the wind pushes me to. That may be something that at some point I will say to you. Probably not, but that would be what I would like to have just said. But that's not the reality of it.
Would you enjoy it though? Like I feel like every time I go on holiday and I find myself in one of those things, I'm like, I feel like I got to do something. Like this is kind of boring, and it's more exciting when I'm working.
That's why I bring my
having
sketchbook.
More fun when I work. Right. Yeah,
I have my sketchbook at all times when I'm on vacation because that's when you get the most inspired for me.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great.
For sure, man. No, I mean, I'm a big fan of yours. Everyone knows your incredible contribution to the community. Thank you for inviting me on, and it was really nice. It's so funny when you see people talk so much. I've listened to you talk, just watching your tutorials. You feel like you know someone before you even know them at all. Like if you've listened to someone a lot, it's like I'm like, oh, there's the guy.
Yeah.
I've never talked to you before, but but I felt like I knew you in some way because I've heard your voice so much in watching these amazing tutorials. But I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you do. And on behalf of everyone else, I know that your contribution is pretty massive to our industry. So thank you, sir.
Oh, thanks, man. That's very sweet. I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
It was great. Great advice for everyone.
Cheers.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.